Well, good evening. It's Friday the 13th, and I know what you're all thinking. Sweet murder? No, something even sweeter. A story. The story of how my father bequeathed to me the knowledge of the cosmos. Let's begin. So, I was, as a kid, a teenager, I was behind in many subjects in school. I'm still not good at math. I've said that before. But anywho, so I was very behind. I was homeschooled, and I tried very hard. It wasn't for lack of trying. I just, had a harder time with certain things. And my dad, the self-proclaimed wizard, he is an initiate of the OTO and, has studied magic and Aleister Crowley. If you don't know who Aleister Crowley is or the OTO, Google it. There's not enough time to explain. So anyway, he comes into my room one day, and he gives me this book, The Enochian Dictionary by John Dee and Edward Kelly. And within this book contains wisdom. So he tells me, my father's very smart, first of all. I mean, he can tell you what a grain of sand weighs, to dark matter, to how a goat gets into a seemingly impossible place on a mountainside. I mean, he knows it all. So back in ye olden times, when he was first learning about this subject, he, I guess, had a copy of this book. I don't know how he came to have it, but there's calls in the back, and he would read them, to himself. And he suddenly noticed, a change. It was very subtle, but suddenly he knew things that he didn't know before. And he told me that people even commented that, he seemed different, that he was, smarter, wiser. So he comes into my room and he gives me this book. And he tells me to do the same, to read aloud or to myself these calls, in particular the call to all 30 ethers in the back of it. So, okay, Dad, I'll be a wizard too, why not? So I take the book from him, and, to this day, I still have it, obviously. And, when I was homeschooled, I had no life, what else was I going to do? So I would read it to myself, and they seem to not make any sense. If you read it, it's, it's very strange and a higher order of thinking. The main contents of the books, it is a dictionary. It's, I guess, teaching you a language, the angelic language of the angels, but in the back are the calls. And you read them all, and I would read them to myself. No ceremony, no seance, just in my free time. And suddenly, I knew things. Things came to me more easily than before. Still not math. Way to go, Dad. But everything else, I have a vast knowledge of space and the cosmos and astrophysics. And I began to excel in many subjects, whereas before I couldn't get it. But my vocabulary was expanded, and, I was reading proficiently, and I noticed the change too. And I was homeschooled from 1st grade to 10th, but then junior, senior, I went to public school, and that's a story in itself. What a transition that was. And I was so nervous because I was told that, you're going to hold everybody back. So, it's ingrained in me that I can't do this. But I was the top of every class. I was principal's list, honor roll, you name it. I was it. I excelled, whereas before I struggled. And you just studied harder, or, it just suddenly clicked. Well, it did suddenly click, but I don't think it had to do with studying hard. I studied hard my whole life, but after reading the calls in the back, and, repetitively, again and again and again, I would read them to myself. Suddenly, I was given the knowledge of the universe, and I do attribute it to this book in particular, the calls in the back, the Enochian Dictionary. If anybody wants to look it up, it is a very interesting read. Now, story for another time is the story of when I summoned a demon using the Enochian Dictionary and the Gosha, or Lesser Key of Solomon. Now, that is a spooky tale, but alas, it is for another time. So in the meantime, stay spooky.